Hello everyone and welcome to another review. Today we're going to get our spooky pants on and we're going to review a series of horror movies. The original plan was to make this video in October, but I thought if I left it that long, I would probably just forget I had the script. So let us begin this adventure as we explore the movies from 1981 to 1987, The Evil Dead. Sorry, my mistake, the third one came out in 1993. The Evil Dead is a fascinating horror franchise. On the surface, it's a pretty typical 80s cheesy slasher, but something about this series just stands out as being much more unique. The use of camera work, editing, and sound design makes these films stand out and have their own uniqueness. And you probably knew this if you had any knowledge at all of this series or the director, but these movies were directed by Sam Raimi, of course. And this was basically the movie that made his career. So, let's talk about these movies, shall we? The first Evil Dead movie is really great. Before I say anything about it, I would like to say that this movie is pretty hard to analyze and critique plot-wise because the budget was so low and it feels more like some friends having fun than watching a huge blockbuster release. And this makes the movie very fun to watch as a horror comedy. I'm not joking when I say this movie is hilarious at times, and I mean that in the nicest way. The comedy is clearly intentional, but at the same time, this movie can be pretty spoopy and pretty gory at times. Sam was clearly very good at doing the best he could with only a small budget, and I can't stress enough, the budget was just about enough to buy a Mars bar. The plot is very simple. Some friends go to a house, they accidentally summon some demons that possesses them one by one. Ash, our protagonist, played by Bruce Campbell, has to kill them in very badass ways. And they do a lot with this concept, throwing the most bizarre and sometimes unnerving concepts at you. The effects aren't good, but who's really complaining about visual effects when everything else visual is on point? Including the comedy. Bruce Campbell's probably the perfect actor for this role, and when this was made he wasn't even an actor. The concepts in this movie are just really cool. It truly feels like they'll throw the most bizarre, disturbing shit at you and then brush it off with some light physical comedy. The only element of comedy I don't think was fully intentional was some of the line delivery, but I say again, these guys aren't actors. So yeah, this movie slaps. It's a great introduction, it has some genuinely creepy moments, and has its own funny charm. And although the plot seems pretty basic, they do a lot of cool things with such a basic format. Evil Dead 2 is epic. It's everything the first movie was, but gave it an improved budget, vastly improved acting, and they took everything great about the original and just turned it up to the max. So the story is kind of a sequel slash reboot in a way. Now the plot, I gotta say, is where this movie falls a little flat. I don't find it as compelling as the first, I must say, but there's no outlying problems with it. Bruce Campbell as Ash is absolutely incredible in this movie, but the other characters aren't as good, I must say. But what I love most in this movie is that it's 80% the Deadites fucking with Ash, which was the best thing about the original. The first film was pretty damn funny seeing Ash as this bumbling chainsaw wielding fellow, but this is on a whole new level. Throughout the movie we see Ash as a normal guy get fucked with by the Deadites and then turn absolutely comedically insane. Then finally with a chainsaw hand shotgun wielding badass that's just played up so goddamn much. Seriously, this is where Bruce Campbell's acting turned from a bit cheesy but a charming physical performance to an acting king. Hail to the king, baby. Okay, we'll get onto that later. Some of the concepts here thrown at you are pure insanity. From the entire house coming alive and laughing hysterically at Ash turning him into a maniac, to this. Oh, don't worry, we'll get into that in the third one. Now, do I prefer this movie or the first? Honestly, I don't know. On the surface, the sequel outdoes the first in pretty much every way, but it does have a lot of fat that could be trimmed off. I just think that the good parts here are really good, but the not so good parts just make me think the first did it better. So overall, I think I prefer the first, but this movie is genuinely awesome and one of the greatest horror movies ever.
This is my boomstick!
The Army of Darkness is the third movie in the Evil Dead franchise and picks up right after the weird-ass ending of the Evil Dead 2. And yeah, this is the worst of the original trilogy. It throws pretty much all elements of horror out the window and is just pure comedy. The problem is it's not very funny. The slapstick in the first two was a perfect blend of being subtle and over the top. and this one feels a little too much like Muppets humour. But let's talk about the plot. So Ash accidentally goes back in time to the medieval period. He tries a spell to get him back to his own time, but accidentally summons the Deadites. But this time, they're a skeleton army. And man, this is not as interesting as what we've had. Like, there's only so much you can do compared to the Deadites in the first two. Like, they went crazy with some of the concepts. But here, we just have a bunch of papyruses running around. Now, while I don't find the skeletons funny, I do like Ash. He's as great as ever in this movie and is still pumping out iconic lines.
Hail to the king, baby.
And I do still get enjoyment from this movie. I think the medieval theme in this movie is pretty unique and helps it not feel the same as the first two. I'm not saying the second felt rehashed at all, it's definitely had its own feel. I just think a new theme definitely helped with this movie. The story feels good for what it is. It's a little less eventful, but it's fine. It's like a good video game story. Now, the ending to this that I saw was actually different from the original theatrical ending, and I think I got the better of the two. In the theatrical ending, it's a lot more comical and bizarre. Ash accidentally goes too far into the future and is stuck in some apocalyptic landscape, and on its own, it's a fine ending. It's wacky and it fits the movie well, but the ending on the re-release that I saw felt like the true and definitive ending. Now this is how you end a trilogy. So Army of Darkness, it has some good things, I had fun with it, but overall it felt weaker compared to what came before it. And I would have liked it way more if it had a lot more horror aspects. So, that was the original trilogy of Sam Raimi's Evil Dead. There is a remake out there and a full series called Ash vs. the Evil Dead, which is quite recent. And I do plan to possibly review those movies one day in the future. So the original trilogy works perfect for what it is. At their worst, these movies are good. One of the highlights of watching this trilogy was seeing Bruce Campbell's acting get better and better. He starts off doing a fun but sometimes rocky line delivery, but at the end, the performance is completely refined. So yeah, this is a great trilogy that invented the career of Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell, and I'm glad that they're still being associated with each other to this day. The acting style of Bruce Campbell bounces perfectly off the directing of Sam Raimi, and I'm glad they didn't overdo it with the lore and backstory, but they do a pretty damn good job at world building. It actually makes you want more sequels. And with that, goodbye.